What's going on, guys? This is Levi at Old Iron Off-Road. Out here in the shop today, banging on this guy. We're gonna kick the tires and light the fires, hopefully. Some specs on this guy. Dana 60 front, narrowed, branded custom interaxle shafts, hydraulic assist, 410 gears, I believe. That's what we stuck in it. ARB front locker. ARB rear locker, Pro Rock or Rock Jock, I'm sorry, Rock Jock rear, Dana 60, GM LQ4 6-liter engine, 4L80 transmission, Dana 300, 4-link rear, Wagoneer 44 springs in the front, lots of add-on. We did a full custom cage for this guy. Our GRC swing out tire carrier bumper, GRC front winch bumper. Now Randy does not do bumpers for the 800s. Just the attachment points are not great. So Randy actually sells us just the Bear Scout 2 bumpers, and we actually build our own mounts. We've got a heavy duty front cross member here, and you can see that the tie-in points are substantial. You got 1, 2, 3 across. On the 800s, I'll show you why, and you'll probably understand. Factory 800 stuff, you got one tiny little bolt relying on not very much sheet metal. You can imagine what would happen if you tried to pull your buddy's YJ out with that. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna be firing this thing up. Just to kind of run down a few of the things that we've already done. Just to ensure that we're going to have hopefully a trouble-free fire up. I haven't started it yet, so you guys will get to see whether we fly or fail. So first things, obviously, on a new fire up, fresh install, fluids. Write notes on the windshield. We actually do that a lot. Write on the windshield what has oil in it, what doesn't have oil in it. Just to be sure. Like, the last thing you want to do is go through all the trouble of building this truck up, go to fire it up, and you forgot to put transmission fluid in it, you forgot to put engine oil in it, something like that, and you end up burning something down just from an honest mistake. I mean, it happens. So fluid, double, triple check your fluids. Electrical system on this thing's brand new. We've rewired it front to back. Obviously, there's still some circuits that aren't connected yet. That's not the end of the world. You just want to ensure that any loose wires, none of this is going to be on. It's not like we're going to have our headlight switch on. But regardless, you want to try to make sure that any loose connectors obviously aren't touching anything. You don't want to have any shorts. A big telltale when you hook up your battery for the first time, assuming that you don't have any of your accessory stuff on, your key's not on, anything like that, is whether or not there's an arc from the connectors or from the actual terminals when you hook up the battery. If you've got an arc, stop. You've probably got a problem. If you don't have something on, you better investigate what's going on, because you've got something amiss. I think the quick wire harness that we actually use specifies using a 6-volt battery charger, I think, to actually heat up each individual circuit as you're building the harness. Probably a good idea. We've built enough of these trucks and we've wired enough vehicles that we, are diligent and careful about running wires. So we throw caution to the wind. We heat up the entire harness at one time and hope that no fuses pop. No, I'm just kidding. Luckily, knock on wood, we haven't had any massive shorts or anything crazy happen. We're really clean about our wiring, connections, grounds, all that good stuff. Anyway, back to the engine fire up, which is what we're all waiting on today. This LQ4 is actually a junkyard engine. It was supplied to us by the customer. We didn't just stick it in its raw, gross junkyard form. We did pull the oil pan. We put a new rear main seal in it. We did add a oil pump pickup girdle to this. The LS-based engine platform has an issue. We won't really call it a problem because God knows there's a million of these things still running down the road that have never experienced any kind of failure. With that being said, that the oil pump pickup mount leaves something to be desired. There's a single screw, the flange is kind of thin, the O-ring fails, you lose oil, engine dies. It's a thing. So we actually put an oil pump pickup tube girdle and a new O-ring in while we had this engine out. Engine was upside down, you know, resealing. This engine hadn't been ran in a long time. A lot of the oil has dripped off of essential components in the engine that need to be lubricated. So, you know, while the engine was upside down, obviously, you know, you drizzle oil over the cam, drizzle oil over the mains, and, you know, get what you can back in it. But the oil, you know, especially pulling the oil pump pickup tube off, that's dry. Pre-fill the oil filter, which we did, and prime the oil system. So what we do to prime the oil system, Melling makes a tool that's kind of like an oil accumulator that you can pressurize, pull one of the oil galley plugs off, blow oil through the system. That's great. I don't have one. I actually have a GM performance manual that came with a brand new GM crate engine. They say to crank the engine over for 15-second intervals until you see verify oil pressure on a gauge. We don't rely on the electronic gauges when we do this. We have a dedicated mechanical gauge that we hook up. And we've already done that. We did see pressure. I think about the third crank, 20 seconds in, we ended up with 30 psi of oil pressure, which is not bad for as slow as the engine spinning over. Happy with that. ECM, we threw the ECM back on. It was actually unhooked. Anytime we're welding on these things, if there's any kind of welding left to do, we usually take the ECM off, just for safety's sake. Anytime you're welding, you want to be grounded as close to where your work surface is anyway. You don't want to be, you know, welding on the back and have your ground clamp at the front and running current through every accessory, and it's a good way to damage stuff. Nonetheless, we do like to unhook the ECM just to prevent anything that could possibly happen. But yeah, ECM's back in. Key on checks are good. Oil pressure is good. Fluids. I can't stress enough to verify fluids. So now I'm gonna set you down, and we're gonna see if this thing will start. Fingers crossed. All right, guys. So again, fluids. This thing's got a 4L80E transmission, pre-filled torque converter. This is a new transmission. Pre-filled the torque converter before we put it in. Put about 2 quarts in it. I think max on the torque converter is 3 quarts. Filled up the tranny, looked up spec. I think it's 8 quarts, 10 quarts, something like that. We're about a quart shy, I believe, which I've actually got a quart sitting over there. But yeah, oil pressure has been verified. While we were cranking it over, this harness that we use, the quick wire setup's actually got an ignition kill switch that kills any of the ignition hot. Also, the ECM was out, so we haven't primed the fuel rail. There was no power going to any of the coils. That's another thing when you're trying to crank these things over to verify oil pressure. You know, you definitely, you know, unhook coils if you have to, unhook injectors. You don't want to be blasting fuel in cylinders that aren't getting any fire, anything like that. So, you know, kill the ignition, don't heat up the fuel system. You just want just the engine rotating over. And even pull the plugs out if you want to, just to help take some of the load off the engine. I think that's probably a little over the top, but nonetheless, we verified oil pressure. So now we're going to verify that we're in park. That's another thing that I do like to do, is check and make sure the neutral safety switch is working. We are in park, but just as a precautionary test, we're going to double check that. So my coil kill switch is off right now, which is killing the ignition system still. I'm not putting any fuel to anything yet. So we're going to bump key over in park, neutral, reverse, shouldn't start. We've got a dead key, which is good. Back to neutral. All right. So I'm happy with that. Key off. Let's turn the ignition system on. Let's prime the oil pump or the fuel pump. Fuel pump primed. That's first key on cycle of fuel pump. That's, you don't want to start cranking on it yet. Let's cycle it a couple of times, get the fuel pressure up. You can usually tell by the way the pump sounds. If you want, you can hook up a fuel pressure gauge. We have one. It's obviously not hooked up. Fuel pump starting to load. Let's give it one more. I hear the stepper motor on the throttle body working, which is a good sign. All right, let's see what happens. I like it. She's gonna go. Another thing with these engines that is worth mentioning, if they set for any significant amount of time, injectors do stick. It's a thing. You know, it may even be, this thing will, typically once they fire up, we kind of listen to them and let them settle into a decent idle. If there's any misses, we'll pull the fuel rails off and actually take injectors loose and pop test them and make sure that they're firing. But injectors do stick on these things when they've been setting for a while. So I believe we've got a few injectors that are sticking. I'm going to actually go through this thing and see what we've got going on, see if I can identify which exact ones are sticking. We've definitely got a few cylinders that aren't coming in. We'll track that down and then we'll circle back. All right, so instead of leaving you guys in the dark as far as what to do to identify dead cylinders, I thought I'd go ahead and add to kind of this whole deal. Now there's two ways to do this. There's the smart way and there's the dumb way. And I'm gonna tell you how to do it the smart way instead of doing it the dumb way. With this, with these headers, you can actually feel for cold cylinders. Hopefully we can get a read. All right, so 93 degrees, 66 degrees, 72 degrees, 82 degrees, let's see. Yeah, I've got three cold-ish cylinders. So 1, 2, 3, that cylinder will burn the piss out of you. Don't touch that. That's the dumb way, is to grab the exhaust manifolds. $106, $104, $107, $75. So we've got four cylinders that are dead, or at least not happy. So we are going to verify fire first, easy test. This harness is a Jim's Performance harness, and I've never had an issue out of his harnesses, but just for test purposes sake, first thing we're going to do is we're going to check for fire, make sure we're getting good hot fire, and then we'll actually plug a Noid light up to each injector and make sure we're getting injector pulse, which I'd say we are. I'd say it's going to be stuck injectors, but we're going to do our due diligence and kind of shuffle through that. So yeah, here we go. All right, guys. So we've spot checked. We spot checked fire with our little handy dandy spark tester, and then we've got an assorted Noid light set. This actually has the Multec injectors, so we use this little guy. I've checked this bank. I got one on this side that's not. I didn't even check it. We have fire and fuel pulse to everything. So the only thing that can be causing a dead cylinder at this point is fuel supply. So that being said, I'm gonna do a little montage. We're gonna pull the fuel rail off of this thing and pop test some injectors on the bench and see if we can get them functioning. All right, guys, we're back here in the shop today, working on this guy. Picking up from where we left off, we actually had some dead injectors on this engine, which I was able to actually free up. We free up injectors. I actually have a couple of different plug harnesses for the injectors, combination of regulated air pressure, brake cleaner, and some 12-volt current applied to the injector. Usually you're able to free them up. I had a couple that were pretty stuck and took a little more persuasion than I would have liked. And by persuasion, I mean I had to kind of smack the piss out of them to get them to free up. And after doing so, I wasn't super sure of the integrity of them. So instead of, you know, running an injector that had less than an ideal spray pattern or, you know, duration or whatever, just opted to replace them with a full set of 8 from Rock Auto. So we're going to set you down. We're going to throw them at it and do a proper fire up, let you guys hear how this thing sounds running on all 8. So we've got all the injectors in. We did have a little bit of issue with the new injectors, getting all the air purged out of the fuel rail. Had dead cylinder on number 1 and number 8. Just by, I could tell there was a little bit of a miss, and then shooting the temp gun on the exhaust on the header tubes. Cylinders were a little cold. It wasn't a dead miss, I don't guess, because they were warming up some, but definitely wasn't firing like it should. So again, I pulled out the Noid light, checked for spark, or checked for injector pulse, had injector pulse, checked fire, had fire. So actually hooked up a fuel pressure gauge, purged it a couple of times. You could hear the filter was sounded aerated. Purged the fuel rail a couple of times, and they started coming in. So it's running nice and even on all cylinders now. So let's hear what it sounds like. Fuel gauge warning starting to come on, fuel's low. It's pretty cool, these speed hut gauges, you can actually set warnings, high and low limits on any of the LEDs, pretty neat. No check engine light. Idling at about 600 RPM. Got a voltmeter on the dash, ARB compressor stuff. So yeah, that concludes that. No camera magic. You know, you see what I see as far as what it takes to get one of these things fired up after you install a junkyard engine. You know, I think a lot of people just assume that it's going to be plug and play, and a lot of times it is. I shouldn't try to make it sound like it's more difficult than what it is, but you know, sometimes you do have issues that you've got to work your way through, and hopefully you guys have a better idea of the steps that it takes to work through those. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Subscribe and like. Enjoy.